Right. So, as long as you've got P5P to test with, magnesium, zinc, you're pretty safe. Now, the pantaloon, which would, as I say, be 65, I would put down there retirement onwards. So, sometimes, I took this from a talk Dr. Sheldon gave in Chicago at the ICAK meeting. I just wanted to do this. We did this, I think, in the update as well. Talked about this just for a few minutes. So there have been times with incurable terminal diseases have had spontaneous remissions. Unfortunately, it's not frequently. That's why they're looked at, and nobody really knows why. But for some reason, some incurable, sometimes terminal diseases can spontaneously remit, even severe cancers. So this is interesting because even incurable disease, if you like, can be altered, so which gives the potential that it could change. Because a person's got an incurable disease doesn't mean, it is incurable. We just don't know the answer to reversing it. Longevity and how communities look after their old people. It seems that in communities where they look after their old people, people live a lot longer because they feel loved and cherished. Dr. Ellen Langer took old people back 30 years. That's, I think I go into more detail, but basically what she did is she took a lot of people who lived in a home, 80-year-olds, and put them back into the 1950s. They decorated the place with 1950 pictures and Elvis, and they played all the rock and roll music and had everything in the room in the place looked like the 1950s. And they lost about 10 years in their life as far as their aging sides. They were much more limber, they were chatty, everything else. They lost a lot of their pains and this sort of thing. And afterwards, at the end of the weekend, they were great. But 10 days later, they'd all gone back to where they were before. Okay, because they didn't live the life, they didn't live it. And that's the difference, is that so much of it is in the mind and the attitudes. And this is what retirement does for a lot of people, is they become old because they're told they're old. So things that contribute to the aging process, the need to get rid of our, or we need to get rid of our need to defend our point of view. So I'm right, you're wrong. Is that right? Jill's never wrong, but I'm always right. I'm always right and you're never wrong. That's the easy way, that's the secret. Okay, so as we said, we're not the same body as last year. Sheldon likes to bring his suitcase everywhere, so he brings the same suitcase, but he said, my body's a different body than what it was last year. True, but only, not all the bone has changed, but maybe as much as 90+% may be different. Nerves and other cells talk to each other by neuropeptides. We now know that they also talk together by light and information through light. Monocytes were first to be discovered, had 90 different receptor sites on them. These are specialized white cells of the non-specific immune system. Thus the immune system is eavesdropping on our internal dialogue. So it's listening, the immune system's listening to our thought process. The immune cells secrete neuropeptides, thus a thinking immune system. The mind is not confined to the brain, and the brain is not in the mind. The mind is everywhere in the whole body. This is a difficult concept to get across because the mind is everywhere but it's nowhere because it doesn't have a physicality, and if it doesn't have a physicality, which is interesting concept to say, it doesn't have a time. So it's timeless or eternal, which is even harder to grasp. So we talked briefly in the morning about light and so on, as far as the DNA giving out light, or what in some circles they call a light body, and whether that's a reflection of the mind. But what we do know is that the light that we reflect, that can be picked up with photo enhancing equipment, is greater in happier people. So if you've got somebody sad, the light goes inwards, it doesn't come out, and you can see almost the darkness within a person. But if they're a happy soul, a lovely person, they shine, don't they? You say this is a brilliant sort of person, they're lovely, the light comes out of them. You can't see it physically, but maybe you can at a different level. But it's a difficult concept to know that the mind isn't a physical thing. But it is at the same time, it has to be eternal because it doesn't have a location, therefore it doesn't have a space and time, as Einstein taught us, are interwoven. So when we're anxious, the body makes jittery molecules in every cell. So when we are anxious, all our cells, in other words, our DNA reacts accordingly. And maybe that light gets less in some cases and more in others. When we feel exhilarated, a dopamine surge, the body makes powerful immune modulating, including the interferons and interleukins. Now Sheldon's a very quiet, calm sort of person, if you know Sheldon at all. And we were at a board meeting many years ago in Orlando, in Florida. And we'd been the day or two before and gone to Disneyland, of course. And in Disneyland they had this tower. I think you did it with the lift. You go up this tower, it's 11 or 13 stories high, and the lift opens, the gates of the lift, straight in front of you, at 13 stories high. And it opens and it closes, and it opens and it closes. And then it drops down 13 stories and stops amazingly at the bottom, of course. And all you hear is these shrieks from people. And there's a queue half a mile long to go and enjoy this, you see. And I said to Sheldon about, you must be nuts, these people. He said, oh, really? I said, well, would you do it? He said, I've done it. So I think he got a surge of dopamine and adrenaline, and he felt great. I said, how did you feel? He felt wonderful. So some people need to get their kicks. So exhilaration is a surge of dopamine. So when you have that high, it's dopamine. And that's how a lot of drugs work, is they block the breakdown of dopamine. So they keep you high for that period of time until the body adapts and reduces it down again. So when you feel exhilarated, it's a dopamine. So it's a big, powerful immune modulating chemicals, interferons and the cytokines. The brain is a magic apothecary that can make any compound, which is interesting. So the average person thinks about 60,000 thoughts a day. I don't know who counted that and how it could be counted. It's disconcerting to know that 95% of those thoughts are the same as the previous day. I think it might be more than that. Sometimes you wake up, don't you, and you think, going into the bathroom, and you come out the shower, and you're still thinking the same thing that you thought last time. You think, why am I doing it? It goes round and round. You didn't solve it yesterday, you didn't solve it last year, you never will solve it, but it's in the subconscious, in the recording, really. Thus we keep creating the same energy patterns over and over again. People with predominantly positive outlooks on life have larger right nostrils. Those who are predominantly negative have larger left nostrils. So now we looked at the mouth yesterday, now we look at the nose. You look worried about that. Okay. Then he talked about the three faces of Eve. This is a film back in 1950s where we had three personalities, people with multiple personality disorder, that a person could play three different roles in their life and become three different people. And you still get that now with people who have multiple personalities. But the interesting thing is that one personality could have a health issue and the other person doesn't. One person can have an allergy to a dog and the other person loves dogs. And yet it's the same person but different mind. And we call that left and right brain patterns and so on. So what our left brain sees within the brain and the mind, more specifically, and what the right one does can be very different. So we know that in the brain that we don't use, we call the unconscious, and the one where we see things is called the conscious. How we perceive the world at the moment is the conscious one. How we don't really know how we see it, but we're taking the information, is the unconscious. So it's the unconscious, which is generally the negative one, which is the one that creates the illnesses. The positive one doesn't create the illnesses, we want to get over it, but the unconscious doesn't want to get over it. So the unconscious quietly creates the illness, of which the conscious one isn't even conscious aware that you've got it. So we're all a little bit like Eve there. So a mutation in consciousness can cause a mutation in the body biology. We believe all our senses are telling the truth. What we see is reality, isn't it? Or is it? So what about that? Do the railway lines really get closer together, or is that illusion of perception? But we know that that's not, but our brain would say, these railway lines are getting closer together. We think the Earth is stationary. Well, in fact, we think the world is flat, don't we, really? They did for thousands of years. It's only relatively recently that we've realized that it's not flat. And so the effect of high cholesterol diets on rabbits, They did at State University in 1980 here. Interesting experiment. They fed them a very high cholesterol diet, and some rabbits got high cholesterols. If there is they just measured the cholesterol, and other ones didn't from the same diet, and they couldn't understand what the difference was. But the lab technician who looked after one of the groups there liked rabbits, and he stroked them, and their cholesterol remained normal. The other ones were in a different lab, and their cholesterols went high. So, love was a very important bit. Massachusetts Health Education Welfare Department looked at the risk factors of heart disease. This study is very well known. 50% of the time, the first symptom of heart disease is death. So you don't have any warning. But the two main causes which are common to us, job dissatisfaction, that was the first one. So luckily, we all like our work. Otherwise you wouldn't be here really, would you? So jobs dissatisfaction and self-happiness rating. How happy are you in yourself, and do you like your work? So those two are the most important factors for the heart, because the heart responds to, of course, the emotions. So more people die on Mondays, usually Monday morning, early in the morning, because they got to face work later on, which is interesting. So I was a great believer you don't work on Mondays. That's my safeguard. Don't work on a Monday. So as men age, their testes get smaller, softer, and sperm morphology or shape and motility decline. Oh, what's that come on? That's testing with, we're back to the module now. So test with different forms of zinc. This is very important. So very, very important, zinc, zinc, zinc for men. Everything to do with testes, prostates, as we'll see in the next module. Problems with libidos or erections can be due to toxicity, like heavy metals, or low levels of testosterone. We're going to look at in the next module of how we make these different androgens, DHEA, androstenedione, testosterone, androstenedione. So prescribe here, maybe again our usual friends, P5P, zinc, magnesium, ornithine, adrenal support, tissue extracts, etc. There. We look at the aging process. This was Dr. Goodell was one of the youngest majors ever in the military during the Second World War. He flew Spitfires over here, which is interesting. And then probably in the 1950s, and then he went through a big personal issue with an alcoholic wife, and this is what happened. So you can see the stress in this man is enormous, isn't it? He has a sadness and a severe austerity in it. And then he remarried, and he married Joanne, his receptionist, and helper, and he was very, very happy, as you can see here. He's 80 here, which is lovely. And then this was a little bit later on. He's lost a little bit of weight here. He was about 86, 87 when I took that picture. So that was an article about England's oldest woman dies just after the world's oldest, just hours after. So there are 4 factors that influence our aging process. Premature cognitive commitments. This basically means you're old. You're retired, you're 65, you've got to put your feet up, all this sort of thing. If you look at birthday cards, they're all about age, aren't they? I didn't know you were this old, how I don't know, another year older, and all this. It's all builds up, and eventually people look at the birthday card and, oh yeah. Exercise, important, regular exercise, nutrition, and toxins. These are the 4 major factors that influence the aging process. So we've become committed to a certain reality of aging. People grow old and die because they see others growing old and dying around. The collective mindset of what aging is supposed to be creates our perspective of what being old is, and we become accepting the biological expressions. Sensory experience is programmed into the central nervous system, and subsequent perceptions reinforce what we now hold on to be true. This was an example of the elephant on a chain tether. You probably know the story whether you chain the elephant to a post when it's younger, and you keep it on there, and eventually you take the chain off and it doesn't go beyond the limit. Your dog learnt that with the electric fence around the garden. You know, first few days, you know, you heard, "Ow, ow," as he got nearer to the electric wire under the ground there. Then he got used to it. He never bothered anymore. He knew exactly where it was. He'd run to it when the postman came, and he wouldn't go beyond it. He trained very well. Or the fish that are divided into different tanks, and they put a glass panel between them so they go up to it, and then you take the glass panel away, and then they don't go through there. Okay, we get conditioned. Cats brought up with the horizontal and vertical lines and so on. There's all sorts of tests there. The central nervous system takes 1/1000th of a stimuli that is available to it, but it only takes in those stimuli that reinforce what it thinks exists. Our sensory experience edits out everything else that we don't think exists and brings in everything else we do think. So reality is infinite possibilities coexisting at any time. We can reinterpret reality because we're not the thought, but the thinker of the thought. We have choices, and we can change things. We should recognize our precognitive commitments, change ourselves, which changes society, which ultimately produces a change in collective consciousness. So let's go through there. Our inherited expectation that the body must wear out over time, coupled with deep beliefs that we are fated to suffer, grow old and die, creates the biological phenomenon we call aging. It's not just that. I remember my parents always saying, poor old age pensioners. So it became together, old age pensioners were poor. And most old age pensioners are damn rich now. They have fantastic pension policies. They're always out on holidays, always away somewhere, and most pensioners are actually very well off. You know, cruise lines are booming, holiday places are booming, and they're mostly pensioners who are doing that. People grow old and die because they see others. That's Shanaka. Belief creates biology. So three ages of man. Chronological age, how old you are, by the calendar. So Maria told us how old she was. I said, you don't tell us how old you are, and remember she did. Biological age, how old your body is in terms of critical life signs and cellular processes. And psychological age, how old do you feel? So after decades of intense investigation, there's no adequate theory to human aging. Even our attempts to explain how animals age have resulted in more than 300 separate theories, many of them contradictory. Negative factors that accelerate aging is depression. So being obviously happy, as we said, the light within us shines. When we're depressed, well, it's a world of darkness, isn't it? Lack of regular daily routine, which would really include exercise there. Lack of regular work routine, again that would be retirement. Job dissatisfaction, we've already said, is the highest risk for heart problems, and an inability to express emotions. Bottling emotions up, particularly anger, are probably very big factors. Interestingly, lack of a regular daily routine. On the other hand, a bit of excitement is also very good. Having some stimulation, something new, is also very good. One practitioner we were reading about just recently, he was recommending speeding. I thought, that sounds interesting. He said you should speed in your car at least once a day to get the thrill. But preferably not when there's police around. Well, positive factors that retard: happy marriage or satisfying long-term relationships, job satisfaction, feeling of personal happiness, regular daily routine, regular work routine. So exactly the opposite things. Larry Spreritz taped conversations with 600 men, a third who were suffering from heart disease, the rest of whom were healthy. Listening to the tapes, he counted how often each man used the words I, me, mine. He found the men who used the first person pronoun most often had the highest risk of heart trouble. Oh dear, what I think. So Flanders and Dunbar's 1950s study into healthy pre-centenarians responded to creatively to change, the most important finding. So this was something different in those, as things evolve and you change and you accept changes and you go with changes. If you become resistant to change, this is part of the aging process as well. freedom from anxiety. You wonder here maybe that the Brexit debate is a bit like this, isn't it? You tend to, like with all debates, go back, is it better to be in a situation where you've got what we're used to, or should we make the change? And most of us don't like change, really, do we? Freedom from anxiety, the continued ability to create and invent. So we're doing that all the time. That's why I love my work, because it's creative, and I have new projects, and people come in and say, every time I come and see you, you do something different. I said, well, that's how we learn, learn through difficult cases and things. High levels of adaptive energy, a capacity to integrate new things into one's existence, and wanting to stay alive. So George Vaillant took 185 young men and monitored their health for 40 years. He found that even if someone appeared perfectly healthy in youth, he was very likely to die prematurely if he reacted poorly to stress, fell prey to depression, or was psychologically unstable. Of the men who had the best mental health, only 2 became chronically ill or died by age 53. Of the 48 men with the poorest mental health, however, 18, almost 10 times many, were chronically ill or died by age that. He concluded that early aging was retarded by good mental health. So we're becoming more aware, aren't we, now, of mental health and mental health disorders as being of real importance, because what you think, you become. What your body actually becomes what the process of our thinking. The most formative years for establishing these conditions was between 21 and 46, because those are the years when a person generally succeeds or fails in establishing a secure sense of self, regardless of even the most terrible childhood traumas and abuse. So if you make it, or if you don't make it by 46, you may feel frustrated you're not likely to ever make it. I think this kind of happen when people lose their jobs. They can be very demoralised, and time goes on and they can't get another one, and then in the end they don't bother to try and get another one, and they go downhill. So mental health is a very important part, and those middle years, and of course also working for somebody in what they call middle management is difficult, because you're always taking orders and pressure to meet targets from above, and things are not being produced from underneath at the bottom. Maybe your production team isn't so good, but if you're on the production side, there's less stress. If you're on the top, there's less stress, but it's the people in the middle and middle management who get the stress from above and below, and they seem to be the ones who suffer most with aging and heart problems. Once the seed is planted, the results of mental health show up physically in the 50s. Later middle age is the perilous decade, because it then leads towards premature heart attacks, hypertension, and many types of cancer. He found that the aging process is learned. People with good health teach their bodies to age well. Depressed, insecure, and unhappy teach their bodies to go badly. Stress did not make people sick. Giving up their inadaptability to stress does. So we need to adapt to it rather than fight it. The greatest threat to life and health is having nothing to live for. Friends, not family, help you live longer. Ooh. I don't think we'll get involved with that one, but because I know a lot of older people move to be near their children and things, and and then they give up their friends, and then they feel completely isolated, and then the children feel, I can't move because mum's moved here, and it causes problems in their relationship, and it's a very difficult problem. Bernice Newgarden in 1973, life satisfaction in people 80 to 100. Remember last module we talked about glutathione, and if you get over the age of 80, you're likely to go on to a good age, because the lowest levels of glutathione to help you detoxify were between 60 and 80. So if you've got good glutathione between 60 and 80, so if you are displaying signs of low glutathione, it's best to do something about it to keep that antioxidant detoxification pathways going. So they take pleasure from their daily activities, regard their life as meaningful, feel they have achieved their major goals, hold a positive self-image, and are optimistic. Happy life is a healthy one. King Solomon said, gladness of heart is life to a man. Joy is what gives him length of days. Solomon said a lot of good things, like Buddha and all these other teachers, Jesus and things, but the wisest things are in Proverbs. The book of Proverbs has the wisest things, which apply today to as much as it did to then. Well, Solomon was the richest man in the world. He made Bill Gates look poor. He was worshipped, Solomon, because of his wisdom. And everybody would bring him gifts. He never charged for his wisdom, but they brought him heaps of gifts, including all the gold and everything else. And he became very, 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 very rich. But he remained the wisest man in the world. And still, if you want to read his wisdom, it's in the book of Proverbs. And everything to do with business, how you feel and everything else, is it already written in there. Wonderful books. Belloc and Bresnor followed the aging process of lifestyle questionnaires. After 5.5 years, 371 had died. By looking back at the original responses, researchers discovered that the most important distinguishing feature of those who survived was not their income, physical condition or genetic health, inheritance, but a handful of extremely simple lifestyle habits. Sleeping 7 to 8 hours a day. Eating breakfast every day. Not eating between meals. Normal weight. Regular physical activity. Moderate alcohol drinking. And never smoking cigarettes. So Belloc found that by analysing the results of a 45-year-old study who observed 0 to 3 healthy habits who observed from 0 to 3 healthy habits could expect an average to live another 21 years. Someone who followed 6 or 7 good habits could expect to live 33 more years. The cumulative result were not quite as dramatic for women. Oh dear. Maybe because they live longer anyway. Barrett's coined the term disuse syndrome. When a person decides to give up physical activity, he essentially invites his entire physiology to atrophy. As a result, a constellation of problems appear. That's the couch potato. You have a grandfather, I think it was, who had a pole from his chair, you were telling me, to change the channels on time. Before the days of remote control, he had a pole which changed the channel. Or he got his wife to do it, didn't he? But he was too lazy to get out of the chair, apparently. So, heart and... disuse, yes. So heart, arteries and other parts of the cerebrovascular system become more vulnerable. Muscle and skeletons become more fragile, obesity becomes a high risk, depression sets in, signs of premature aging indicate that the body is biologically older than its calendar years. So those people whose biological age was older today need to take note of that. Half senile cases resulted from malnutrition, especially B12. This is really common, of course, amongst vegetarians. If people become vegetarian or go towards a more vegetarian vegan diet, if they have problems with their teeth, sometimes they can't chew meat and fish very easy. So, they eat rubbish, basically, biscuits and softer foods and things. And then very gradually they get B12 deficient. And then they get the first signs of hypoxia because they're not carrying enough oxygen around. And that's usually a sign of strange behavior going on, or dementia and forgetfulness. And then medics don't seem to ever test for this. To us, it's pretty obvious. When a person comes in and you go through all this, and you go through, the first thing you think about is nutrition, and you're not going to be surprised if B12 comes up. And of course, in the majority of cases, it's not actually B12, it's adenosyl or methylcobalamin, the active forms, which nobody really knows, nobody tests for, because there is no way you could test really for hydroxy adenosyl or methylcobalamin. So malnutrition is very important, particularly B12. Side effects of drugs. We talked about that woman interviewed on breakfast television taking 15 different drugs. In many countries of the world, when we go to Los Angeles, they say, well, that's normal. That's very common. That's not abnormal. People are on just heaps. So it's not just a reaction to a drug, but it's a reaction to the cocktail of them all. Smoking, alcohol abuse, dehydration, depression, inactivity, and hypothyroidism. Half senile cases resulted from those things. In place of the belief that your body decays with time, nurture the belief that your body is new at every moment. So every day you get up and you jump up and you say, my body is new. In place of the belief that your body is a mindless machine, nurture the belief that your body is infused with the deep intelligence of life. whose sole purpose is to sustain you. What makes us old isn't the stress so much as the perception of the stress. So, second one was exercise. You should enjoy regular exercise which is enjoyable and cause no strain on your physiology. So it shouldn't be exercise that hurts or causes a strain on you, pulls your muscles. Age should not be considered a deterrent to exercise. There is a lot of research just recently, hasn't there, been with cancer cases and taking them up now into exercising and jogging and things like that, and they've actually found that they improve. They feel much better. It doesn't necessarily extend their life expectancy, but they feel a lot better for doing it rather than saying, I've got cancer, you know, I've got to take it easy. And, you know, but actually getting out there and exercising has proved to be very beneficial. Many of the biological and psychological processes of aging may be due to inactivity. Saltin asked 5 men ranging in conditions from extremely fit to sedentary to remain lying in bed for 24 hours for 3 weeks. Oh, bliss for a day anyway. At the end of the time, all the subjects suffered a decrease in aerobic capacity that's equal to 20 years of aging. So what do they do in hospital? They just leave people in beds, don't they, and old people's homes. You know, they're left in bed, or you can get up and sit down, which is not that much better than just being in bed. You know, people who take to their beds tend to stay in their beds, don't they? This is the thing. When each subject was allowed to stand up out of the bed for 5 minutes per day, almost the entire loss of function was prevented. They did not have to move around or in any way use their muscles. Just the exposure to gravity was enough to help. Evans and Roseberg in 1965 found 10 biomarkers that were used: muscle mass, strength, basal metabolic rate, body fat, aerobic capacity, blood pressure, blood sugar, cholesterol, HDL ratios, bone density and body temperature. Ideal exercises are swimming, brisk walking, yoga. Jogging can cause problems with women because of the breast tissue. The optimal exercise program involves 30 minutes at least 3 times a week, but not every day. By 2030, 20% of the population will be over 70. I would have thought that's already the case. I would have thought probably 20% of the population is over 70 now, because we're baby boomers. If we were born between 1945 and 1965, that 20-year period, before the invention of the birth pill. So when the birth pill came in, the population dropped. But between 45 and 65, our parents were encouraged to have children, and up went the family allowance, the childhood allowance, or whatever it's called, because we lost so many young people in the war. Regular exercise has been shown to increase the maximum oxygen uptake, well, we're all familiar with that. HDL, cholesterol, muscle strength all improved. Physical activity lowers heart rate, blood pressure. So physical activity is one of the most important things for staying young. Nutrition, lifespan is being extended by decreased nutritional intake. This has been intermittent fasting. This is the idea of the 5-2 type of diet, where you fast for a bit and the body rests, and it does increase in rat and mice models, indicated extended lifespan with up to 50% calorie intake. It's a little bit controversial now whether this is actually true, but we'll stay with the study there. Is calories and not nutrients. The Framingham Heart study showed increased health benefits with reducing body weight. We now know that that probably doesn't apply either. You can be underweight, you can be overweight and be very heavy and be healthy. What matters is things like GGT, these biochemical markers. If your gamma-glutamyl transferase is high, then you will be predisposed to all those cardiovascular problems, diabetes, insulin resistance and things. So that's a better marker than anything else. However, national statistical analysis by the National Institute on Aging has shown that overweight individuals survive longer. This is gain as you age advice is only for those who are strictly healthy and does not apply to diabetics, hypertensives. So we can add in, as I say, the GGT. If you've got normal GGT levels, you'll probably, doesn't matter what you are, as long as you exercise, you'll be good. Early primate studies suggest that calorie restriction can retard some of the decline in metabolic processes, especially insulin resistance. Calorie restricted humans have lower body temperatures and insulin levels and higher levels of DHEA. Examining participant data from the study here, found that men in half of the above study population live longer than men in the other half. How does calorie restriction work? Reduces free radical perhaps, reduces glycation, that's the adding of glucose and sugars to proteins, retards aging in the central nervous system, reproductive and hormonal system. Downside, reduced ability to deal with hypothermia due to lower body fat content, and poor wound healing, which tends to indicate these people are losing vital nutrients. You know, if you just fast 2 days of the week or more, and you don't supplement in with zinc and the other essential nutrients, you're going to get more and more depleted, and that's the downside, definitely. So, second childhood. The only thing we need to say here is really some interesting research. The reference nutrient intakes for over 65s and over 85s, and percentage of individuals in the UK receiving less than the reference nutrient intakes in non-institutionalized individuals. This was in 1998. I'm sure it's probably out of date by now. So the ones with the arrows, red arrows, are significant. So over 65 is here and over 85 is here. So over 80% of people, non-institutionalized, were deficient in vitamin A. 80+% of people were deficient in vitamin A. So if we look at these, we think, well, yes, the importance is I must look at that. Pantothenic acid, 80–90%. Now, pantothenic acid goes on in B5 to make CoA and acetyl-CoA, which is involved with acetylcholine, which helps us with our memory and our neuromuscular junctions and the parasympathetic nervous system. So you can say, oh yeah, memory, strength, etc. is all part of the aging process. So think of those when you get to that age or you've got patients, don't be at all surprised if they may need extra of, this is pantothenic acid, not even the coenzyme. Biotin, and that was a big surprise, 95–99% here of all people are deficient in biotin. And biotin is made naturally in the gut. We can take it in the food, but we make it from good bacteria also in the gut. So again, it brings us back to the gut. Vitamin D, 97%, 99% of people are deficient. So whatever they say about vitamin D, most of the population in this country is vitamin D deficient. But remember, it's something you need to muscle test the amount a person needs. Don't take too much, but you do need, certainly over the winter months. But most old people are hideously deficient. Vitamin E, the most powerful antioxidant for oils and the oily parts of the body, 92%, 97% of over 85. So. Magnesium, 80%, 90%. So magnesium is really, really important as far as, topping up. Whereas calcium was relatively, only 45–55% deficient. Potassium, 91%, 99%. So hideously deficient in potassium. Eat more bananas. Iron, not so bad there. Zinc, 61 and 68%, so very bad with zinc, of course. And 80%, 90% of copper. They're interesting figures because they're all down, really, to some extent, but there's hope, as I say, if you look and you can supplement a person with a good multiple, you can't go too far wrong. I did this with my mum. I put her on 1 or 2 multiple capsules of a bit of everything in there, and 3 omega-3 oils, and she lived to 96. So, it does work. People may laugh about it years ago, oh, you're taking all these vitamins, you're just making expensive urine. Okay, that's fine, doesn't matter. You might be right, you might be wrong, but, she's still around till 95, 96. So diet for dementia, this is Morris combination of Mediterranean DASH diets. So they suggest 4 to 5 leafy green vegetables a day. Orange and red fruit and vegetables, berries, nuts, especially almonds and walnuts, and of course those mustn't be roasted, because if you roast them they probably go rancid, and of course also they need to be shelled fairly fresh. The longer they've been shelled, and you buy almonds which have been shelled and walnuts, they've probably gone rancid. Beans and pulses. So this is a sort of combination of the Mediterranean diet and the hypertension diet. So they're looking, fundamentally at the Mediterranean. Olive oil, well, you all know about olive oil now. Oily fish, so that would be your herrings and your pilchards and your mackerels. Skinless chicken, but remember, chicken doesn't have any B12, really, so you've got to watch that. Whole grains, we tend to use kamut wheat a lot. It's less sensitive in every way, it's rich in selenium, and this is for people who, take into account they might be sensitive to gluten or alpha-gliadin proteins from wheat. But kamut seems to be much more tolerated, or other ones. And red wine, resveratrol and other polyphenolics are in red wine. So red wine is something apparently, a good few glasses of that, 2 glasses or so, is a good idea. A gallon is not such a good idea apparently. Summary of the nutrients to consider for managing memory and loss. We took these all from the modules on the aging process and dementia that we did a few years ago. So energy production, mitochondrial regeneration, hypoxia, antioxidants, detoxification and acetylcholine system. So these are all the bits that we need to address with helping people from a memory point of view. So these would be your energy, your B complex, your magnesium, your DHA and your alpha lipoic acid. Mitochondrial supports would be similar sort of, all these vitamins and minerals and oils. Mitochondrial regeneration, vitamin D is very important there. Alpha lipoic acid with acetyl-carnitine, the Bruce Ames formula of making old rats into young ones. Hypoxia, so all those things in the hypoxic chart, all those folates there, pyridoxal 5-phosphate, vitamin C, iron, etc. Antioxidant support, remember cloves has the highest antioxidant capacity of anything else. Just under that would be turmeric and cinnamon. Vitamin E is the highest of the vitamins in the fat-soluble components. Glutathione, which we'd now add on the ribose there, and lutein for the eyes, ginkgo biloba for the brain, memory, lemon balm and rosemary for the memory. Detoxification, again, coriander, cilantro, otherwise it's called, very good detoxifier, yarrow, lemon balm, N-acetylcysteine, walnut tinctures and probiotics. And for acetylcholine, think again choline or phosphatidylcholine, B1, manganese, zinc, B complex. And that's Bruce Ames himself. I guess he's probably still taking his formula. He's still going, he's about 88, he's still working hard at University College, is it Los Angeles, UCLA. Yeah. So acetyl-carnitine, which helps, remember, to get fats and oils into the mitochondria through the carnitine shuffle, along with alpha lipoic acid, which he explained very nicely. I thought alpha lipoic acid was to be able to change pyruvate into acetyl-CoA, but in fact he said alpha lipoic acid is something that stimulates the production of glutathione in the body, and that it's actually an pro-oxidant which makes the body produce more antioxidant, and the natural one is glutathione. So that was the mechanism of why it works.